Hello everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Wise Decision Maker Show, where we help you make the wisest and most profitable decisions. Today we'll talk about productivity and the cost of unproductive employees, which is more than you think, I bet. So let's talk about the costs of unproductive employees. They're kind of like pebbles in your shoes during the marathon. They may seem small, but they really hurt organizational success. And I have to tell you, whenever I feel a pebble in my shoe, even though it seems small, I stop to take it out. And that's something that organizations should consider doing as well. These unproductive employees can make the difference between mediocre and outstanding quarters. Their influence is quiet, but it really adds up over time. Now, we've seen a pretty clear trend of dropping US productivity. So an EY Parthenon study shows that the US experienced 5 consecutive quarters of year-over-year drops in productivity from Q1 2022. That's a decline that hasn't been seen in the data since 1948. All companies are impacted by this decline, but many really underestimate the specific costs of employees who are less productive. Let's talk about direct costs first. You still pay them full wages and benefits without getting enough work in return. For example, consider a $60,000 per year employee being unproductive 20% of the time. So that's 1/5 of 60,000, which is 12,000. That's a significant amount of money. So if you have a 10-person team, that's a loss of 120,000. If you have 100 people team, that's a loss of 1.2 million. That's pretty significant. Let's talk about hidden costs. Let's talk about those as an example. Indirect costs of unproductive employees. They act as a toxic undercurrent, and ripple effects can spread like a contagious yawn across a boardroom table. So this is not something you want to have. Let's talk about how they impact team dynamics. Research shows, decrease morale and engagement. So colleagues feel resentful toward unproductive team members because they are not contributing, they're not cooperating, and they lower overall team productivity, weighing down the entire team. There's more workload on others, causing exhaustion, burnout, so that's beside resentment. There's increased management burden on them, due to them. So managers having to manage these people who are less productive consume managers' valuable time and take their focus away from other priorities. And it causes higher turnover of good people. So high-performing employees, they get frustrated covering for underperformers and eventually seek employment elsewhere, driving up turnover and replacement costs. Let's take a case study. So let's talk about a hypothetical company, Widget Inc., that employs 100 people. Average salary is going to be $60,000 a year. Let's assume 20% of their workforce, so 20 people, is unproductive 20% of their time. So that's going to be $12,000 per year per person who is unproductive. 60,000, 20% of that is going to be 12,000. And of course, if we take 20% of their workforce, that's going to be 20 people. So 20 people times 12,000 is going to be 240,000 per year in just direct costs alone. Let's talk about hidden costs though, because you might be surprised by how hidden costs compare to direct costs. So let's talk about morale and productivity. Let's assume that the 20% of the workforce that's unproductive is causing just a 10% drop in morale and productivity across the whole team. That's going to be a loss of 600,000 because you have 100 people who are getting 60,000 each. So that's going to be 6 million. And a loss of 10,000 in morale and productivity is going to be a loss of 600,000. That's already more than twice as much as the direct costs. And let's say that managers spend 10 extra hours per week managing unproductive employees, a total of 520 hours per year, and valued an average salary for a manager, let's say it's 80,000, that's going to be another 40,000 lost. And let's say there's an increase in turnover, just 5%, due to unproductive employees, and you need to replace 5 top performers out of those 100 people, and the recruiting and training of each new employee costs around 10,000. So that's going to be a total replacement cost of 50,000. So let's talk about the financial impact. Adding up these indirect costs results in a staggering loss of $930,000 per year compared to the $240,000 that's going to be the direct costs. So this is about 4 times as much as the direct costs. So this is a huge additional cost of these unproductive employees. That's nearly $1 million of indirect costs, and of course an additional $240,000 of direct costs that could have been better spent on innovation, growth, or rewarding top performers, giving back to shareholders, whatever it might be. Now, why do managers tend to underestimate unproductive employees? There are a couple of cognitive biases at play. These are dangerous judgment errors that cause us to make bad decisions. And one of them is the anchoring bias, which is relying heavily on the first piece of information when making decisions. For example, a manager might have seen an impressive resume, they might have a good impression during the interview, and so they might underlook and undervalue signs of people not being very productive as the signs emerge when the person's on the job. This can result, of course, in what we talked about: decreased team morale, lower productivity, and increased management burden. Optimism bias is another problem. So there's a tendency to overestimate positive outcomes for many managers. And some managers may tend to be too optimistic about unproductive employees. They might realize they're unproductive, but give them way too much time and not fire them nearly quickly enough. They think the impact is small or will go away soon, and so they see these behaviors as a rough patch. And this can lead, of course, to increased turnover among good employees if not addressed. How do we combat these cognitive biases? To combat the anchoring bias, you need to assess employee performance against objective standards and benchmarks, challenge initial perceptions, and seek alternative explanations. To combat the optimism bias, you want to look for data and feedback that challenge positive assumptions. Take a balanced view of the best and worst case scenarios. What about battling unproductive employees? You want to set clear expectations of roles, responsibilities, and performance expectations. Invest, of course, in training and development, in case it's skills and knowledge that don't allow them to excel in their roles, and foster a positive work environment to help employees be collaborative, communicate effectively, and recognize and praise hard work. Now, you want to have regular performance evaluations so that give people constructive feedback, monitor their performance, offer flexible work arrangements. It definitely helps improve productivity and job satisfaction. And you want to eventually get the wrong people off the bus. If you need to, create a 1 to 3 month performance improvement plan. If no improvement, you want to make sure to be ready to part ways with unproductive employees. So, here's the bottom line. Unproductive employees drain resources and morale, and in order to make sure that you have a productive workforce, leaders must recognize the true costs of unproductive employees, overcome cognitive biases that mask issues, and have targeted strategies to combat unproductive staff. All right, everyone. I hope you learned and valued this episode of the Wise Decision Makers Show on the cost of unproductive employees, which is likely more than you think. Please make sure to subscribe wherever you checked out the show and leave a review. It helps others discover the show and it helps us improve the show.